I got it shaped up the other day.
It's well trimmed, nicely done. Yeah.
Good job.
It was what was that? Sparta. They're asking what did it look like. I was like the dude in Sparta, like the 300 Sparta guys. Like
Leonidas.
Make me look like him.
Well, at least it's still black, right? I've got this starting right here, so that's.
I've got.
What's that called? Snow on the porch. There's some snow on the porch. Yeah. It's all snow eventually. Just going to tell you.
I swear, Oliver, this gets better.
What I was about to say is my Zoom has Chris and then Phil below. So it's almost like I have, I don't know, like what Phil will, I would actually, maybe I'll stop there because Phil might get upset.
Before and after? Is that where you're going here? Yeah. Nice start, dude.
Yeah. Why would I be upset? It's Lockhart who should be upset. Oh my God, this is what's going to happen to me? Holy cow. End it now.
Fail now. Yeah.
Is that a glimpse into my future? Is that it?
Yeah.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Consultants Saying Things. I'm Chris Lockhart. Really good panel today. I'm joined by the full crew. We have Bill Bensing, Phil Yanoff, Carol Hamilton, Shashi Shrimali, and special guest Oliver Cronk. So Oliver is chief architect at Tanium. He is the podcast host of Architect Tomorrow, among other things, which I'll let him talk about. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about some cybersecurity. So, Oliver, I'll toss it to you. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and let's get into this topic because it's a huge one.
Sure. So a bit on me. I've been an architect, different types of architect for many years across different industries, and joined Tanium, who are unified endpoint management and unified endpoint security platform, and also, as you say, lead on Architect Tomorrow, which we might come on to in a bit. But yeah, essentially, I thanks for kind of doing the cybersecurity topic because I think it's a really timely concern, right? I mean, often cybersecurity and technology are kind of behind the scenes, kind of keeping things running, but right now I think it's really come to the forefront, right? The IT folks, the technology folks, and the cybersecurity folks are kind of really on the front line, as it were, in ensuring their businesses and their organizations continue to operate during unprecedented times, right? So, and I think the thing that's really happened is digital business, but also mass working from home, distributed workforce is creating new challenges, and it's making businesses kind of have to make quite rapid decisions about how they continue to operate. And whereas previously, perhaps there would have been a lot more risk, kind of mitigation, a lot more planning, a lot more a whole change program maybe to kind of make a massive shift like this. Not only from the technology standpoint, but from like a people and working practices kind of standpoint as well, right? And hence why sort of cybersecurity awareness, as much as cybersecurity kind of technology, is really important right now.
As you pointed out, the entire shift to the work from home model, right, is something that companies do over years, typically, right? Not all at once, right, in response to external stimuli, right? I mean, I don't know, Phil, you work with these, a lot of people that come to you that are looking to be consultants, and I mean, I guess I would think cybersecurity would be one of the top things or one of the top skills that they're talking about right now.
Well, it's obviously hot in the job market. And as you point out, lots of folks need it, right? I mean, again, the sort of work from home, we are now, I mean, it used to be, and we used to be protected, right? I mean, it was in a castle with a moat around it. And now we're not in that kind of space anymore. We have our armies are in the field and they're widely distributed, right? And Oliver, I have to think that's a big challenge. I don't know how you're addressing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's exactly the way I look at it as well. The Cold Castle walls have kind of come down, right? I mean, the front line is now essentially someone's house, and therefore for us as an endpoint sort of security and endpoint management solution provider, our kind of time is kind of now really in order to kind of demonstrate why the endpoint is that critical kind of line of defense, as it were. That and yeah, it's not all about technology. You need to make sure your people are educated and doing the right things as well. And perhaps we can come on to that in a bit. But no, for me, it's kind of like the endpoint is now the front line. Whereas you're right, before perhaps you could sit behind those layers of security that you might have, the physical security of the office, perhaps, the kind of swipe badge entry and all those sort of physical security measures, particularly heavily regulated industries. If you think about kind of, banks and trading floors and so on, oftentimes a lot of security and a lot of compliance checks and controls, right, around is someone doing insider trading or whatever, often rely on kind of, cameras in the office or, swipe badge sort of checks to see if someone's tailgating someone, all this sort of stuff, lots of kind of measures that you just can't, you can't enforce when folks are working remotely and working from their homes. There's nothing stopping you, one of your kids just sort of accidentally using your machine if you leave it unlocked, and all of a sudden maybe can delete a critical file or something. This sort of stuff is now, challenges we're all facing sort of day in, day out with our extended enterprises, because they truly are now extended enterprises, right?
What does intrusion detection mean when no one's in the castle anymore?
Well, this is that's a really good point. I think a lot of solutions are no longer that relevant, because if they relied on being on premise and they relied on a bit of tin sort of sitting in the office to do that sort of intrusion detection and check for those sort of attacks, then yeah, that's really not going to be doing an awful lot right now, other than perhaps the limited number of people that might be in the office, or perhaps if there are still physical production parts of your organization that are still operating, then perhaps they're monitoring those people. But yeah, and I think it's kind of been a real wake up call for folks that have kind of been operating on that castle and moat methodology, both from, like I say, the physical security, but also the technology controls that they had in place. And also the acceleration of folks moving to cloud. One really interesting anecdote I heard recently is, for those of you who know Amazon Cloud, there's a spot price service that you can use when there's low capacity, when not many people are using it. Apparently Spot just stopped fairly soon into the whole lockdown situation as businesses were spinning up more, cloud compute to kind of respond to e-commerce. So there's lots of indicators that cloud and online is obviously where things are going, which just, to your point, Phil, means that a lot of this on-premise stuff that was keeping people safe or keeping organizations safe just isn't doing an awful lot for folks now.
But would you say like it's one industry is hit more than the other? For example, I've been working from home, or any firm I have worked with in the past, like for 15 plus years, we have been working from home. So it is not a new for us, versus there are some industries which are more in-person, laboratory services or something of that sort.
I don't necessarily think it's an industry, but it may also be a kind of type of work, right? If you look at contact centers, when I was in industry, like working as an enterprise architect, the contact center world, given GDPR and privacy controls, is a hotly kind of regulated kind of role, right? They've got access to lots of personal information, often banking information and things like that. And so many organizations have chosen not to get those folks working from home because they just can't implement a solution that can securely kind of manage the privacy issues there. So yeah, I think industry is definitely ones that are more exposed to kind of sensitive data, financial data, sensitive information, are certainly the ones that I find this challenging, because all of a sudden they're kind of faced with a really difficult decision. Do we essentially kind of affect our customer experience, our customer service, by not having as many contact center workers, or effectively saying don't phone us, which some companies have literally said, which is quite incredible really, but that's just the unprecedented sort of times we're facing? Or do you start to say, right, I'm going to accept some risks about the security and the privacy of some of this data? So it's a really interesting sort of trade-off. And I think, it's clearly affecting different industries in different ways, but I would say you also need to look at the types of work as well, and the nature of the data that folks have access to.
So I know, Oliver, I know you primarily deal with endpoints, the security risk, but is it your perspective on, are there new threat models? Are there new vectors of attack? Are there new things that maybe we haven't seen before because we haven't all been at home at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, look, certainly there are, but I would say it's more an extension of the same. Like Shashi said, for some, working remotely isn't a new thing. It's just that this wholesale working remotely is the kind of the extreme that no one's ever faced. So there's a few things that I would say they're not just on the security side either. They're on the capacity as well. Like if you think about how many organizations VPNs were ever designed to handle the amount of traffic they're now being hit with, where people are trying to log in and work from home. So there's folks then not able to use those sort of services because they're just over capacity. So they're then sort of working around the constraints of working remotely. The other piece I would say is that unfortunately there are people playing on the pandemic. So there are people playing on people's fears, doing phishing attacks and various other things, impersonating business, emails, which perhaps when you're working from home, your to a personal email and perhaps your work email might be a bit more blurred. So you might better get people through personal email accounts and other forms of communication that previously folks wouldn't have looked at during the working day as much, maybe. And there's that blurring, I think, between personal and business, which some are exploiting for sure.
My experience has been a lot of technology components and systems and products historically in this space were geared for like full-on enterprise environment, a corporate environment.
Mm-hmm.
Intrusion detection systems, right? Policy servers, et cetera.
Yep.
And then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, it's like your Dell computer comes with McAfee pre-installed, right? And like that's supposed to be secure. And so now we've got that level of protection, but we have the responsibility of the enterprise work going on. So, and I don't know. I know Bill's dealt with some of these types of products, but are there new ways of defending against that kind of attack? I don't know, Bill. I'll leave it to you guys to debate on who should answer that question. But
Bill, you go.
We're gonna geek out because I want to see what you think about this, Oliver. VPN is dead and it doesn't fucking know it yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. The VPN is definitely dead. Is one of the trends I would say is coming out of this pandemic. Yeah, I think zero trust now has a massive opportunity. The kind of I mean, I think it's really interesting what Google are doing with BeyondCorp and so on. So, and I'm not going to lie that for Tanium that's a little bit challenging because, as Chris said, large enterprises, we've served the biggest enterprises in the world, like the US military, one of our biggest customers, and of course there is a certain way of operating with those large corporate networks. And so, the moving to the distributed model does come with some challenges because we're, our unique selling point is that we've got a distributed compute, a distributed network architecture that's quite different, well, very different from anyone else's, and it works better when you're on a LAN, in all honesty, because you can exploit, not exploit, that's definitely the wrong word. You can leverage the fact that you're on a local area network and reduce the number of connections back to a single server. So we've absolutely looked at other parts of our kind of architecture, like the zone server, for example, that allows you to essentially create encrypted channels to your security management and your IT management solutions without having to stick that traffic on the VPN, because that's what was killing a lot of customers, was patching and all that sort of stuff was going over the VPN, and that's just nailing a VPN connection. You can't do any business over that VPN connection then because it's being completely saturated with security traffic. So, reclaiming those connections for the business. But you're right, it's ultimately proven that VPN is either very expensive to scale or just doesn't scale and creates a horrible experience for employees working remotely. So yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that one.
Can you explain what zero trust is? Because it's funny how when some people just never heard about it before, and then like their eyes, you look at them, they're just like, I still don't understand. It's like,
and it's one of these it's one of these new buzzwords as well, which many people think they understand. It's a bit like cloud. There's more to it than I think. Just those two words. So some people sort of think, it just doesn't mean anything is trusted anymore. Essentially, for me, it means sort of layering of trust. And you start off with the assumption that everything is not safe. And so the zero trust model is you effectively start from a point of, and so it's a bit like when you're walking down the street and you're in an unknown place, you treat everyone like a stranger. You would be cautious about any of those people if you didn't know them, about meeting them. And actually, say you walk into a different department of a company that you work in and you don't know those people. It's a bit like that, rather than just assuming, oh well, I'm in the office, so everyone here is cool. It's being more cautious about the systems that your computer is talking to. And one of the key components of that we address is what is going on with that device. How secure is that device? How up to date is it? Is it patched? What operating system is it running? It's that kind of device footprint piece of the Zero Trust story that we very much work with. And we've announced sort of relationships with Okta and so on and other things. I need to be a little bit careful because I know there are some things in the works that I can't talk about. But no, that's very much where our heads are, is in that being part of that Zero Trust ecosystem, which, yeah, I think it's a techie thing, definitely, but it's ultimately it could lead to a much better experience for employees.
So I would say it's no longer a techie thing. If you see how most of the world has responded to COVID-19, it was a zero trust model. I don't trust anybody. I'm going to put on my mask. So it has come out of the geek bag. And
that's
now
a really interesting analogy.
Right?
Yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way, but no.
And if you follow that, then you can stop the spread.
Well, and Zoom has played right into that, hasn't it? Because you've got all these people who are working from home who are now having those casual conversations, which feels like that blend between social and where is work ending and where is home starting. And then Zoom comes in and says, the news is suddenly filled with Zoom is, if you use Zoom, you're going to die. And so now all of a sudden security, and what I hear as I'm listening to this is I hear, oh, great, here's 14 more things I have to worry about, right? Now I've got intruders, which are going to walk in through my screen as if we didn't have enough problems as my whole business is in flux and in change.
I get like, we see these changes. We see the impact of a crisis changing sort of how we're working and the implications of all that. Who manages this? Who manages this for an enterprise, Oliver? Who does it?
I mean, I think this is where the kind of CISO role has really kind of been elevated, right? I mean, I think there's been a lot of debate about how technical a CISO should be versus sort of how business sort of savvy they need to be. And I think it's made it clear that the CISO needs to talk the business language. They need to be able to kind of communicate and lead a situation like this and make sure the organization is thinking about the holistic risk picture, not just the sort of security and technology risk picture, but those physical risks that we've kind of touched on, like the kids perhaps getting access to something they shouldn't have access to, and or just leaving the laptop somewhere, or working in an environment that's just not sensible given the information you got access to. So, yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's that kind of cliche that security is everyone's responsibility, a bit like health and safety, right? But ultimately, I think folks need to kind of have that leadership to understand what are those really important things I need to know, because ultimately, as Carol says, this can be really baffling for folks. It's just too much. It's just, what now? What's the next thing I need to be aware of? And I think it's important that, that kind of comms, given that folks are kind of in a really stressful time at home, at work, kind of this blended model, they're probably suffering from like information overload anyway. So how do you kind of make sure you land the right messages with them, I think is really important.
So I had a question around the org structure, right? So we always had this debate around general IT, where does IT, CIO of the company report to? That business savviness is also an IT thing, but now they have understood, or everybody kind of agrees, CIO needs to be more business savvy. But when you bring in the CISO, is it like CISO sort of reporting into CIO versus it should report more to your, directly to the CEO of the company? What are the trends around that?
It's very much moving to kind of a board level issue for many firms. I mean, certainly when I was working in banking, the CISO was kind of a board level, or if not, was certainly a regular guest at the board meeting, right? And it would advise the board on the trends and the challenges and the risks. But I think the key challenge is how to distill what is often a very complicated topic and very technical, layered in a number of ways. How do you distill that down and make that make sense? So what are the kind of key risks or risk indicators or whatever that, the board really needs to kind of understand to make sort of sensible judgments? Because if you're just sort of talking cyber mumbo jumbo at them, they're just going to get lost. So I think that the point about where they report is one thing, but I think it's also making sure you've got a CISO that's able to kind of act as that bridge between business risk and technology risk and physical security risk. And I guess the other answer to the question as well is, does the organization already have a chief risk officer? Because if it does, then it's probably the CISO reporting into the chief risk officer. If they don't, the CISO is almost probably becoming a bit of a pseudo chief risk officer to a degree, I think.
Usually risk and compliance are sort of combined in many places, what I've seen. So would you say that, security, risk, and compliance kind of responsibility folds into one?
I think this is a topic you could debate, separately, right? Because when I was at Deloitte, it was really interesting to see how different it was in different organizations. Some had a separate risk and compliance function and a CISO function and a legal function. I mean, this whole how you organize this sort of legal risk and compliance and cybersecurity piece now, I think lots of organizations have taken different roles, but personally, I see a lot of overlap between these, and I think it makes sense to have, obviously the right balance of having enough depth, but I think there's a danger that if you split it too thin, you don't get that kind of overall view. And I think you need to be able to make the pragmatic trade-offs between, operating effectively as a business and these different sort of security and risk concerns. I think it makes sense to roll all these things under the risk kind of agenda. But I think it very much depends on the industry and how they're kind of structured, and perhaps are there gaps that you need to fill on the other C-suite members by those other roles maybe?
Where I've seen it particularly ineffective, right, is whether by regulatory requirement or whatever, cybersecurity is seen almost purely as a technology function, right? And meanwhile, sitting over there are all the risk and compliance people, and they're more thinking of it in terms of legal, right? Or
financial risk, maybe. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so I just always find that interesting, right? You say cybersecurity, it's like, sometimes the answer is, well, what we mean is VPN and firewalls and policy servers and SSO and all these other things. And I'm not sure that that's really true. Carol, you said something earlier that I thought was interesting also, right? I mean, so, if it is mumbo jumbo, if it is sort of, an IT technology thing, like how, what's the path here to make this real for the employees that actually they're the first line of defense now, right? Because they're sitting at home in their office.
Right.
How does it become real for them?
They have to understand the priorities, because it is so easy to send out another email of warning. Here's the latest risk and here's what it is. But you probably did that yesterday, and you might have done that at 10 o'clock this morning, and you're going to do it again at midnight tonight. And cybersecurity, while it's become an important topic, if it's not a priority in my brain, because ultimately that's not at risk to me personally, I may not think about it. I may just go, I'm going to add that into the list of things that they want me to worry about that I can't do anything about. So the real question becomes, what's in this for me? What is the impact? If this thing gets into my computer, what does that do to my life? Does that change everything? Have I just put the company at risk? What is it? So that's where some of these priorities have to be decided. And then what is the actual action you want me to take right here, right now? Very, very specifically, preferably in less than 2 sentences. You got to figure out how to make these technical things mere mortal. What is the impact to me, and what exactly do you want me to do, and by when? Now I can put it into a timeline, and even if I don't understand it, I know I need to go through this protocol in order to make my machine safer. The basics of, should I keep my 14-year-old off my laptop? I've got that, because I understand that from a realistic perspective.
What is the secret to that? I need to write that down.
Yeah, it's handcuffs, it turns out, and a locked room.
Okay.
But the reality is,
I keep uninstalling. Does Tanium have a solution for this, Oliver? I keep uninstalling TikTok from every device, and it keeps coming back. And I feel like either the Chinese are in the house or something's going on.
It's actually a virus.
We can talk about that offline.
Okay, great. Yeah. I took a note on that one. Sorry.
But don't waste your time, right? I mean, don't waste my emotional or mental energy saying, keep my 14-year-old out of there. Tell me what I'm looking for. If you see this, that means you need to call us. Okay, clear, to the point. And now let me get back to all the other fires that are going on in my life.
No, I get it. And I think the challenge is I don't think there are that many people that can translate. So there are many people that are great, subject matter experts at the latest security threat, and they know all the technical ins and outs of that exploit and how that would happen. And but then translating that into something, in plain English, is often a challenge, right? And equally, the comms team that might be asked to send out the email, they're just sort of left copying and pasting the mumbo jumbo from the cyber team and going, don't really understand what that means, but I don't understand it, so I can't edit it.
Right.
So many places I've worked, it's literally been like that.
And at some point you need somebody, and this comes back to Shashi's question of what is the structure? Who's making these decisions of what is the greatest threat right now? And how often can you hit me with the greatest threat? Because at some point I'm going numb. And that's your most dangerous place, is when you have inundated me with information that didn't translate into my world. And now now I'm not even opening your emails because, whatever, Linus, I moved on.
And I guess this is maybe where you kind of have a combination of, if you have the technology kind of able to kind of cover the things that it can cover,
yes,
then you maybe focus on the things that are the human social engineering aspects.
Yes.
And it's kind of getting that balance right, I think, because otherwise, if you're kind of constantly worrying about phishing scams or whatever, but those are things that probably the spam filter and other technologies are pretty good at flagging these days. Yes, you need to educate your users your employees on what a phishing email is, etc. But that's there's almost different levels, isn't there, of different sort of exploit and risk. Like you said, to me individually, if I get this wrong, if I'm a member of the C-suite, like we've been talking quite a lot about the board, then clearly there's going to be potential career impact to me if I've not got this right. But if I'm just working in the sort of business unit, it's probably different. But at the same time, it's probably not going to help me get promoted anytime soon. So it's kind of it's a tricky one.
But to our audience, in just a second, I'll give back the microphone to everybody else who speaks this even clearer than I do. But to our audience, I think the key piece here is, as a consultant selling in something, if you can also be the voice of, and here's how you can communicate this, and here's how we're going to partner in that translation with you. If there's any piece of that you can own, you are becoming one of the most valuable people on their staff, even if you're external, because now they've got a resource they can go to that says, how do I make people care? I get you know when to set up the flag, but how do I make people care? And if you can help me with that language, boy, are you important.
I'm curious, Oliver, I mean, kind of taking off of Carol's idea there and kind of riffing a little further, as a consultant, as someone who might be deployed, I mean, you are an endpoint for some organization, which might actually have multiple clients, right? Mm-hmm. What am I supposed to do about that if that's my gig, right? I mean, there's got to be opportunity for me. I think some of this is obviously dealing with the security people of my firm, but I think I could be proactive. I'm kind of curious as to what advice, somebody who's in the know would give to someone who is an endpoint on a consulting gig.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of comes back to actually what Bill was just saying about storytelling, right? I think it's a tricky one because I see lots of ambulance chasing in this industry as well, right? Like lots of people pointing at, oh, look at those guys, they just got kind of hacked or whatever, and let's use these guys as the kind of bogeymen to kind of sell some software or sell some consulting or a solution. And I think that's generally doesn't go down well at all, right? Because it's just not a nice way to kind of do business. And I think it's a fine line between kind of using those sorts of stories, like you don't want to be the next X, but also kind of letting people know that there are this is a layered kind of solution, which is probably perfect for a consulting kind of engagement, right? Where you've got different sort of pieces of this to kind of bring to bear. Like Carol's touched on the kind of human element. There's clearly a technology element. There's a process element. Ultimately, this is a multi-dimensional thing. And also there's lots of, as Chris said, kind of risk models and threat models and so on and so forth that need to be rethought and reworked now. So it's kind of almost like, if you guys had a risk model or a threat model, you now need to be kind of looking at that and kind of dusting it off and kind of thinking, is that now the same? Are there kind of big things that you're seeing that you should be flagging to your client? So I think it's the other thing for me is coming back to the point we were making about the kind of risk team, the cyber team, is often this is an opportunity to make that kind of risk world data driven. And there's an opportunity there to kind of say, look, this has just got to the point now. It's too complicated to do this with a clipboard and a spreadsheet these days, guys. You've got to kind of use the data, the continuous sort of, compliance sort of concept. Or continuous advisory it's got to be a part of your service now. It's kind of a wake-up call to say it's just not possible. You can't go around with a clipboard now because not everyone sits in the same office. You can't go and check their laptop because it's at home. So you're not going to go and drive around everyone's houses and check it. You've got to start using the tools and the platforms in order to do effective consulting.
Well, and I think when you take great data and you wrap a narrative around it, like to Bill's example, you talk right to people. They get it. When you take that data that's real, we had a client recently say, in April we had 174,000 emails or Zoom calls between our group, and now in May we had 572,000. You can tell that amps it up to a point where you go, oh, you know what, security really does play a role in this. And so I think when you start taking that narrative and making it personal and then putting the data in to back it up, you really speak to both sides of the brain, and it does stick.
So I see three different segments of cybersecurity skills. One is where you generate awareness, you write policy, procedures, and guidelines which people need to follow. It's more like a communication, although softer side of security, which is important. Second is the hardcore skill set required to make your infrastructure secure, who understands the nuts and bolts of security from infrastructure, application, network standpoint. And third is the technology experts who are like developers who needs to understand how to apply those security best practices when they write the piece of code. Is there anything else which is missing in the cybersecurity realm?
So I think there's whole books and podcasts, right, on things like NIST and cybersecurity kind of frameworks and so on. And I think there's clearly kind of like threat intelligence, there's threat hunting, there's there's kind of enumerating of kind of areas that you might get attacked. But yeah, I think you're right. There is ultimately the kind of the infrastructure, as you say. There is the user awareness, and I would say most companies now have some form of insight coming in, whether that's a big data solution or something more like Titanium, which is more kind of driving you real-time insight on what's going on in your world. So I think it's. Yeah, I mean, this gets really complicated, and obviously the cybersecurity vendor landscape is incredibly complex, yes. And there's a lot of vendors out there, and one of the things we try and do is simplify. So we aren't a point solution. You don't just buy us for one little bit of this. It's a platform play that kind of addresses a number of challenges, not just in the cybersecurity space, by the way, but also the kind of operations side of the house as well. Because we found actually, if you get your IT infrastructure right and your endpoint security right, then actually the cybersecurity piece is enhanced massively. And if you break down that silo successfully, you improve security and you also improve user experience for the employee as well, because no longer have you got these different teams kind of arguing with each other about, oh, you guys aren't doing a good job, you're not patching, whatever. Actually, if they're all working off the same kind of set of data and same sort of process flow, they're actually kind of able to collaborate, and some of that sort of friction and sort of finger pointing, starts to go away. So, it's a complex one, and many organizations do this differently. We've obviously touched on the kind of zero trust piece. That's clearly going to kind of be a part of folks' strategies moving forwards. And this concept of defense in depth, these different layers, and clearly there being a human aspect to that as much as a technology aspect to that is really important.
So is that a hook then, Oliver, for if I'm a senior associate at Deloitte and I'm running a project somewhere that has nothing to do with cybersecurity, is that something I could take advantage of and maybe differentiate my offering, or sell up or sell out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in my experience, the cyber area, even before the pandemic, was one of the fastest growing areas of the consulting business. Right? I mean, it was where a lot of revenues were flowing and lots of growth. So I think clearly, if you can kind of branch into that world, or equally, join up those sort of teams, I think there's a massive opportunity there. That's not to say that it's easy. I mean, I think we run into a lot of challenge there, where folks just like their silos. They like their little point solutions. They like their little spreadsheets, and it's often difficult to get them to see a better way. So it's not to say it's an easy gig, but certainly one that you can certainly drive some great outcomes and some measurable improvements. That you can look at the data, look at the metrics, right? How quickly are you patching, or how quickly are you closing down things when they're discovered? There's some great kind of KPIs and things that you could drive for.
I actually think one of the most promising ways that someone who may not even be interested in cybersecurity, but sees it as an opportunity, right, to sell. I think, listen, like and anyone can feel free to disagree with me, but when COVID really started ramping up, there seemed to be a rush by everyone and their brother to come out with contact tracing applications, right? It's like, here you go, install this app on your phone and it'll track you better than TikTok can track you. I think there are a variety of reasons why maybe, I have my own perspective on that. That is a whole nother topic, but I think this idea of that seemed to be like the gold rush, right? Like, oh, that's the way to go with this. I actually think the way to go with this, and I think you and I talked about this offline, I think Oliver a while back, but this idea that, there is room here to help a client speak to each other internally, right? Because, it's not just like, no offense, it's not just let's go install Tanium everywhere. That's my answer as a consultant. No, it's, there's tech, got it. But there's also this, we have to go talk to risk and compliance. Do you even know who they are?
Yeah, it's hilarious, isn't it? Oftentimes that the external consultant is the one that is kind of connecting up the dots. Much like, Chris, we spoke about recently, like kind of the enterprise architect kind of being that person as well, so the kind of architects and consultants are often the ones, because they're just sort of talking to the different parts of the business. They're the ones that see the fact that a person sat there and a person sat there really should be working a bit more closely. But, just the internal silos mean they aren't. So, I definitely think there is that opportunity. If it's not the classic quote of borrowing a watch and telling the time, I can't remember that one. There's something there, right, around it almost being screamingly obvious, and that the company should be doing this already, but it takes an external consultant to come in and point some of this stuff out, and it gets listened to, right?
Yeah. One last question from my side, right? So we talk about cybersecurity awareness when we come into corporates, right? And there's a fear of threat. You might end up losing your job or get dinged on your bonus if you don't follow certain security and guidelines, right? I think where the industry is failing is not educating kids right at a young age the importance of cybersecurity. My daughter has been doing online education, but what is the importance of a password? How do you keep yourself safe? That this whole COVID thing has accelerated their access to internet. That is not starting there. That should be part of the school technology curriculum, and I don't see that happening.
And it's almost an extension of personal hygiene in a way. Like, and as weird as that sounds, because we often sort of see this as a hygiene thing. And that's often relatable. Like you need to take care of your personal hygiene. You need to take care of your technology hygiene as well. Like, you need to make sure you're not storing too much data on there. You need to be careful with your passwords, as you say. And it almost feels like it's something that folks should get trained on early on. Because I think there is, if you look at the younger generation, I think there is a tendency to kind of share and not think about, I'm overgeneralizing here, and I'm sure I'll get loads of blames for saying this, but there is this kind of tendency that the implications of what they're doing isn't perhaps always considered, perhaps because the education isn't there. Folks just see the benefit and they don't see perhaps the darker side.
That's a white space. That's a white space for us.
I think that's interesting, because now so what I hear you saying, Oliver, is, you can tell your children, did you brush your teeth? Did you, brush your hair? Did you wash your face? Did you change your password?
And did you update your iPhone?
Did you update your iPhone to the latest so that the remote charger will work?
I was just trying to figure out if cybersecurity comes before or after sex ed.
Yeah. Good question.
Before. Because if you are running out of time, if you are going on an online one, you need to be educated.
I think the reason people have issues with security now is because the way they're looking at security models is flawed. And I'll take the cat versus cow. I think everybody looks at the organization as a bunch of cats. So my fluffy server, my this, my that. Instead, they need to be looking at it as a cow. And I go to the cloud native architecture. So some of our viewers would be into cloud native architecture. It's like, for example, one of my security things is I got containers I kill every 5 minutes. So I have security apps running in the background. And my threat, and I don't have to pay hundreds of $1,000s for edge devices. I just kill that container. So by the time they could actually get to that container, if they can get to it, the time of life for that to live is 5 minutes anyways. And
so Bill, there's a whole
of,
separate conversation we should have about the whole kind of cattle versus pets sort of security thing, because I think there is almost almost a security by not obscurity, but kind of just thinking that the whole game changes with containers. You're right to one level, but I think there is also sort of forensic information and things that just get lost when you just kill them and things like that. So yeah, I think in general, I agree with you. You do need a different approach, but I think this sort of expectation that all of a sudden security sort of is magically easier with this kind of cattle model, I don't know. The problem shifts, right? But like I say, it is a whole topic on its own. So maybe we should get on a separate call and jam on that one.
That's what I try to do. Is I think you could turn the problem on its head, because it's one of those deals. Like, the light bulb was not invented by iterating on the candle. And so I almost see cybersecurity as right now they're trying to iterate on existing cybersecurity mentalities, which is not going to solve the future and or a lot of good current ways of getting into systems.
As Oliver pointed out, we could talk. This could branch into so many different areas, and I'm going to have a problem coming up with the title for this episode, because calling it the one about cybersecurity implies that it's like a 12-hour seminar.
Yeah, that'll attract people.
What about endpoints? Maybe. What about endpoints?
Yeah, maybe it's security of endpoints. But so I guess my question here is sort of just to bring this home and wrap it up, and we'll let Oliver go last. But I want to know from each of you guys, right? Like, so what is the question, right? It's like, great, we have all these changes, we have this crisis, we have the way that it's been done before, we know it's changing. It used to be servers in a data center. Now it's billions of mobile devices everywhere. So what? If I'm the cat on the ground, what do I do? Or do I do anything differently? And I guess this would be my question. I'll start with Shashi. Let's start with you, buddy. What should we do differently?
So one is, awareness. It's extremely important. That's, first is, if you want to act on it, you need to be aware about it. Second thing which I feel is this awareness has to start right from younger age among kids, so they are aware of it. So by the time they join the workforce, they appreciate the importance of something like this. So they can start following those, and your enterprises will be less risky as compared to many others. From a consulting standpoint, I think it's an immensely, very high potential. I see more and more people going for their undergrad in cybersecurity. It's a very upcoming discipline which will be in demand not only now, going forward. So I would encourage my child also to look into this and see needs to be done.
So in addition to world champion Taekwondo, she will also be expert in cybersecurity. I
don't know about expert, but at least not a newbie.
Got it. Not a newbie. Carol, what's the implication here? What's your final thought on this?
I think the implication is that we're going to need to find ways to simplify, not dumb down, but simplify these messages to people in a palatable at size so that they can say, I need to know this. And I think so much as Shashi's point, it's going to become, I brush my teeth, I do this. And before I shut off my laptop, when I shut off my laptop every night, because that's a good thing to do, I do these protocols. And maybe those protocols get updated, but I don't need to keep having the world's on fire messages about that. It's just just expect new protocols once a week as we continue to reinforce our security. It just has to get simple, and it has to be prioritized so that I can put it into my day in a way that has meaning, instead of here's another fire I have to put out.
You know what? I think this problem goes away.
I get it.
No,
but is that miraculous?
No, not like the miracle. I get it. Just one day, it'll just all fade away. No, I mean, so you've got stuff, like where Oliver is. You got Tanium, and this stuff eventually has AI loaded against it. Not that it doesn't already, right? And basically, it gets smarter and smarter. And we got to need people. I was sitting here thinking, when Shashi's talking about, well, I want my kids to understand cybersecurity. I don't remember any cybersecurity books from when I started my career, but I'm pretty sure what they would have said was make sure that your punch cards are locked up at night, right? And it would have just been, it was a different problem altogether. And the problem's going to keep changing, and the attack vectors are going to keep changing. And I think, the cool thing is good software out there with AI. It's always awake. It can be scaled in a way that I can't be scaled. I think that's really helpful. But to me, I think what my responsibility is as an individual human on this planet trying to do the right thing for people to say, hey, we need to make sure these tools are deployed and that we know how to use them, that they're actually doing their jobs and they're properly configured. There are things for us to do. And it is part for all of us, right? All of us have a security role, even if there's no security never showed up in my job description. It is, in fact, like everything else, security is part of everybody's job description because, there are threats everywhere.
Bill Bensing, you have any final words more about cows and cats and other animal husbandry?
I think you could solve this. I'm going to take a page from Ben Traynor from Google, his book. Ben Traynor developed the site reliability engineering aspect. His whole goal was we're going to take software engineers and have software engineers solve infrastructure and operations problems. Hence came out SRE. They've been very good with it. And so this is going to say take software engineers and solve security problems. I think the biggest thing we see in technology, and this is maybe me being biased, but software engineers create. You have a lot of people that don't create, they just do push buttons, the next. I really think you need to take software engineering approaches to cybersecurity, and then you'll change the landscape of what the threat is.
For my part, for me, right, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of what do I tell my client, right? How do I, not to be crass about it, but how do I take advantage of, this moment in time to maybe differentiate or do something differently? I look at it from the perspective of, a little bit of what Phil was saying. I think the technology is almost table stakes, right, at this point. And for me, I think it's, what are the people problems involved in making this either go away or become built in to the point where it's not, it's part of design. Right. I know Bill's big on security as part of design, right? I think, how do we get there? And I think if you are advising your client on anything and you bring to the table this idea of, how are you, Mr. Manager in a company, going to have a conversation with your peers about security from the get-go as part of the design? I can help broker that conversation. That's the power of a consultant I can bring to this table. I can help you navigate that conversation. And maybe you get to the point then where not that security is an afterthought, but it's an afterthought because it's built into everything that we do all the time. And I don't have to go and spend 20 minutes picking out every bicycle in the picture in 20 blocks it gets to a point where it's like, security by, what is it? Security by obfuscation or, security by complication. It's so secure that I don't use it. So with that, Oliver, I'll give you the final word on this. What are your sort of takeaways on this topic? Because I know we covered stuff.
No, it's been great to hear different perspectives on this one, and I agree with what you've said. And I think for me as an architect, I kind of look at this from an architecture standpoint, and I think many organizations just haven't architected their systems management or their cybersecurity solutions. What they've done is they've had a burning problem and they've thrown cash at it. A lot of organizations I see, they just have a mess of different things they've just gone and bought, right? Because someone's come in and gone, oh, you need a GDPR solution, or you need this solution, a compliance solution. And before you know it, you've got 40 things running on each individual computer, right? That's in your environment. And that's just crazy. You've got 40 things sucking up the ability of your computer to do something useful. So I think for me, it's not just about technology, but the technology landscape for many customers is just too messy and needs rethinking. And to your point, Chris, now is maybe an opportunity to kind of reflect and rethink on perhaps those castle and moat things we started talking about at the beginning, whether it's time to sort of retire those and go for something that's more dynamic and meets the kind of modern challenges. But but I also echo Harris, it's not just about technology. Folks need to understand what that's important to them. And so I think it's ultimately the classic kind of architectural piece for me, which is the technology, the process, what people should do, and then the kind of people user awareness education thing. And I think it will continue to be that. But to Phil's point, it will evolve and it will change, and those things will adapt over time. So I think it's kind of investing in those three layers and reviewing them on a regular basis. And for consultants, that's ultimately something that's ongoing, an ongoing service offering potentially, or an ongoing sort of maturity assessment or review that would be very valuable to their clients right now.
So picking up on the architecture theme, do you want to, plug your stuff?
Yeah, what? I should have used that as an opportunity to plug, shouldn't I? So yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Architect Tomorrow.
I'll edit it so that it seems like.
Oh, nice. Very good. Thank you. So Architect Tomorrow is very much about this. It's not just about cybersecurity. We're looking at other big sort of challenges as well, like sustainability and other things that architects need to start thinking about to help their organizations sort of adapt and thrive in the new sort of strange times that we're finding ourselves in. So for me, the reason we created it is that the ability for one sort of architect or a consultant, in fact, in this instance, kind of ability to kind of process all the sort of technology changes and business changes, industry changes now, it's just too complicated. It's got past the point of being able to comprehend all of that. So Architect Tomorrow is an attempt to kind of bring different perspectives together on the topic of architecture, and that's not just technical architecture, but also enterprise architecture and business architecture, and get people to kind of come together, much like we have on this call, really, and kind of look at an issue and how can we collectively problem solve that in a different way. So we're not all sort of investing the same intellectual processing, solving the same thing over and over again. So look, if folks want to get involved in that, I'm very very open to folks kind of getting in touch with me and getting involved.
And how can they do that? Is there a website? Is there a LinkedIn group? What's the best way?
There's a YouTube channel. So Architect Tomorrow is the YouTube channel. So check that out. And there's a LinkedIn group, Architect Tomorrow, as well. And over time, hopefully we'll have more stuff online. But at the moment, that's where we're hanging out. We're on LinkedIn and we're on YouTube.
And if they want to contact you directly, best way to do it, LinkedIn?
LinkedIn or Twitter. Yeah, I'm Cronk at Twitter. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Luckily, my name is pretty unique, so you can find me fairly easily on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, listen, I appreciate you joining us from the UK. Thank you. So that is all for today. I want to thank everybody. I mean, I don't know that we've all been on in a while. So Bill Bensing, Phil Yanoff, Carol Hamilton, Shashi Shrimali. I'm Chris Lockhart. Please go to LinkedIn to find this. Go to YouTube to find this. Download the audio-only version if you choose to do so from all of your podcasting places. And it's also available at consultantsayingthings.com, as always. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. And I'll see you around next time.